Welcome to This Week in Wrestling History.
Welcome to This Week in Wrestling History, episode number 10. We did it, double digits.
Woo!
We're almost like a real podcast now.
Yeah, sure.
Almost. Well, thanks very much to everyone that's stuck with us so far. We definitely appreciate it. We're getting pretty okay hits. I'm pretty happy with what we're doing.
We hit over 1,000 downloads last
Yeah.
week for the first 9 weeks.
So hit 1,000 downloads. We have our highest show ever last week. So
We finally broke 250 for
Yeah.
a single episode. So
that's really awesome for us. So thank you very much for everyone. And we're going to do kind of a much different show again, but this will be a one-off this time, definitely. We actually have some plans for the upcoming week. So look at us getting all professional, planning things out here.
yeah, we're actually doing things now.
So before we get to the show for this week, though, I guess we'll probably, again, just go over what happened in actual wrestling this week, just super quick. We had the Super Showdown.
Ugh.
Nothing to write home there, honestly.
It was anything but super.
Yeah, it was just treading water. It felt like nothing major at all.
The biggest thing out of that out of that card was the cruiserweight title.
Yeah, cruiserweight title. I blank on this guy's. I'm gonna call him Bobby something, but it's not.
Nope, Murphy.
Buddy Murphy. I was close. Bobby, close.
Same thing. Takes it off of Cedric Alexander.
Right, and his only pinfall loss in 2018, apparently.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure it was Murphy's, well, aside from the NXT tag titles, his first main roster title.
Yeah, and really good match. Unlike pretty much everything else on that card, which I thought it was not good at all. The women's match I really disliked. The 3-on-3 match.
Yeah, was not good.
Didn't think that was anything good at all. The
Tate-
Iconics. That was actually a really awesome moment. Let's not dwell on anything negative here.
Yeah. Having the Iconics win in their home country was kind
Iconics
of big.
winning in their home country, and then I sent you a video link to a
Yep.
quick little 4-minute clip of them afterwards. The WWE officials had actually recorded on cell phones their family's reaction to their matches, then showed it back to them. And I'm not too proud to admit I missed it up a little bit. I didn't cry over it, but I missed it up because they were so genuinely.
They got pretty emotional about it.
Yeah, they were genuinely happy and excited, and just that it was a really cool little moment of seeing two people just genuinely happy to be doing this.
Yeah. What else was there? Oh, Bobby Lashley and John Cena against Elias and
Owens.
Kevin Owens. Yep. And John Cena unleashed his sixth move of doom,
Yes,
which
the
was
sixth move.
the lightning punch.
Yep.
It was anything but lightning.
They're really going deep to piss off the smart fans with some of that stuff, and I don't know what they're hoping to accomplish, but I don't think they're doing it.
No, not at all.
I mean, what's the end game there? Best case scenario, you make no one's going to go, "Hey, I was wrong the whole time. I'm going to not criticize the product anymore."
That's not going to happen.
It's just realistically not going to happen. Everything else is just a giant middle finger to people that are probably more likely to spend money on your product.
Mm-hmm.
It's a middle finger to the people that are definitely keeping their network subscriptions active. It's the middle finger to the people that would be buying your higher ticket items like championship belts,
Yeah.
more T-shirts. Not sure I get the end game on that one.
No, was not anything that I was looking forward to when they were announcing the sixth move of doom. What else was there? Oh, Triple H versus Undertaker, which those guys are far past their prime.
The match was essentially in slow-mo. The ending was fine for what it was as of Saturday morning. Come Monday night, it absolutely made no sense.
Yeah. It I was not thrilled with any of that. The stuff with Sean.
No.
Sean looked old.
Shawn looked old. Undertaker looked old. Triple H looked old. Kane didn't look old. He's the only one that looks like he can still go, because he is the only one that can still go.
Yeah. The fact that Triple H almost needed to be carried through the WrestleMania match against Angle and Ronda should have kind of given a signal.
Yeah. And the match ended with everyone kind of raising their hands together, being like, all right, we did it. We fought through this. We're comrades in arms. Monday night rolls around. Yeah, we don't respect you guys whatsoever. Like,
Exactly.
it didn't make any, it makes no sense other than, hey, let's get to the payday.
Exactly, because that's all they're worried about is the four of them showing up in Saudi Arabia at this Crown Jewel pay-per-view and making a couple $1 million a piece.
Which, good for them. I get it. But it doesn't make any sense with how it was presented to us. And it's...
The part that also bothers me is the fact that there was a report going out that, including their entrances, the tag match at Saudi Arabia is going to run anywhere from 36 to 48 minutes. Those four guys do not need that much time.
I mean, they may need that much time to walk to the ring.
No, I don't care.
No, I mean, have you seen an Undertaker in his prime took 5 minutes to walk to the ring? I mean, Undertaker with bad knees and hips, I could see that taking a solid 20.
Put him on a damn golf cart then. I don't want to see... My biggest issue...
I'm just going to say, the entrance may be more entertaining than the match, so maybe you give it the time.
Fair point. My biggest issue, though, and it's one of my bigger issues with WWE wrestling as opposed to other companies, they keep going to the well and pushing the old timers.
Yeah, that definitely is a large problem they've had, where they never let the new stars fully develop into what they could be, because they always have to bring back the old generation, the previous guy. Especially right now, they're bringing the old folks from the Attitude and Ruthless Aggression eras for one more run, but it's never one more run.
You have such a talented roster. I don't understand why guys like Elias, Kevin Owens, who else? Finn Balor. Finn Balor, of all people. You have one of the most talented junior heavyweights, and he's relegated to Mixed Match Challenge.
Yeah, pretty much. They don't need Brock Lesnar anymore. He fulfilled his role. Let him go.
Right.
Like, let Roman Reigns, for better or for worse, stand on his own. Let him and Braun go at it, do their thing, get Brock out of the picture. They don't need it.
No, not at all. The only other match I would say that was worth checking out was AJ and Joe.
Yeah, that match was really good. I have issues with the overall larger picture of their feud. I felt like the matches happened in the wrong order.
Yeah, I could see that.
But overall, all the matches have been individually very good. I don't think the feud was booked properly, but that's whatever problem at this point.
Nitpicking at that point. Yeah.
I'm not going to be upset that AJ Styles is still the champ at the end of the day.
Right. And I'm not going to be upset that Samoa Joe had a really good match with AJ.
Right. My biggest problem is that I'm not sure where we go from here with Joe.
Right.
But
anytime I get to see those two wrestle, it's usually going to be a good match.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to see it. So leading into the actual episode.
Yes. So this week we're definitely doing something very different. We're going to do a top 10 list, being our 10th episode.
And the top 10 list is going to be 5 of Ryan's and 5 of my biggest moments in wrestling that kind of pushed us to be fans.
Yeah, and we'll get right off the bat, they're not necessarily in a least to biggest order necessarily.
Right.
They're ranked by, we're not even saying these are the 10 best moments in wrestling. These were the 10 moments that between the two of us meant a lot to us personally and really made us invested in professional wrestling.
That either brought us back or put us into professional wrestling.
Exactly. Just kind of deep into our enjoyment with the business, we'll say.
Yeah.
So, all right. Without any further ado then, let's jump into our top 10 list. right, so here we go with our top 10 wrestling moments of Ryan and Jacob here. Again, they're roughly in the order of our own personal order of least to best, least to greatest.
Yeah, it's not like a definitive 1 to 10 kind of thing. It's just, yeah, we like this one we like a little bit more, we like this a little bit more kind of thing.
Right. And again, this is not in any way definitive. It's more just us looking back at moments we liked. And, send us an email with what you think is, what did we leave off the list? What meant a lot to you personally?
Yeah, like actually send us something, because we have this Gmail account for the podcast that doesn't really get anything other than our subscription stuff that we use for the podcast.
Yes. Check us something over at wrestlinghistorypodcast@gmail.com with whatever your top, 5 to 3, whatever. Your top wrestling moments. Let's see what you think.
All right, so you want to go first?
All right, I'll start first since the first one was one I picked. So number 10 is, as I pull up this list on my phone. All right, my number 10 was the beer bath of Steve Austin on Raw. So that's when Steve Austin drove the beer truck into Raw to the ring, cut a promo, and then hosed down the corporation.
Cut a promo standing on the hood and the top of said beer truck.
Yeah, climbed on top of the beer truck and cut the promo on The Rock and on Vince.
I had never actually seen that. I've seen like clips of it, but I never actually watched the actual promo.
Oh, really?
And the response and stuff. It was pretty interesting.
I really liked it because I felt like that was kind of pinnacle Attitude Era of holy crap, anything can happen. And it may not have been the first major stunt with Stone Cold. He may have filled up the Corvette first. He may have actually drove the Zamboni out to the ring previously too, but
was this prior to or after the bedpan?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm not even sure about where it falls in the chronology of everything, but I really felt like this was kind of the best representative of Austin's antics.
Well, and not only that, but you had Austin and The Rock as the heel in the midst of the corporate ministry, or the corporation kind of thing.
Right. No corporate ministry at this point.
But it was one of those like top things that you're right, it's the pinnacle of the Attitude Era.
Right.
Like,
And it's funny on so many levels. I mean, it's just a great promo between Austin, Rock, Vince. It's great reactions from Vince. Has great reactions to so many things.
That face when that truck comes out and almost knocks the Titantron over.
Right. So the great point of it just feeling like so not planned, because the truck comes in and catches the bottom of the Titantron and pulls it out a good 5-10 feet. And you don't know if that thing's going to just suddenly drop. And that would be a really awful thing to have happen.
Yeah. Especially, well, it wouldn't have been too bad because it was the end of Raw. So,
well, I'm just thinking about all of the weight of that thing crashing down
straight onto the stage.
Especially if it got brought forward into the stands.
Yeah, that's true.
So anyways, there's Vince's reaction to the truck coming through the Titantron. But my absolute favorite part was Vince swimming in the beer in the ring, trying to get away from it. It's just so ridiculously awesome.
I didn't realize how much beer. Do we know, was it actually beer?
Oh, I'm pretty sure it certainly was.
How much beer was actually being sprayed onto the ring? Like the ring was soaked.
Oh, it was soaked. Everyone in it was soaked. It was gallons upon gallons upon gallons.
Yeah, for seeing it for the first time, it was pretty entertaining.
Yeah, and so all right, so that's number 10. So next up we have, I think it's Jacob's with, your list is out of order.
Mine.
So
yeah, mine's pretty out of order. I just randomly wrote.
All right, I'll go off my list. So nope, I lied. Next up is mine as well.
Okay.
So my next moment's actually from WCW. It's the original list of Jericho.
Ah, yes.
It's the list of Jericho's 1004 moves. Again,
I had seen clips of this. I hadn't seen the entirety of it or what happened the following up as he keeps reading off of it.
This was right in the middle of Jericho and Dean Malenko's feud. Dean Malenko actually had to take some time off, so it was up to Jericho to carry the feud all by himself for a little bit. Jericho comes to the ring with this giant stack of papers.
And it was the old school printer paper that was
Yeah,
like folded at a
all
seam.
connected. It's all one giant kind of contiguous thing. So Jericho brings us to the ring, has a match with Marty Jannetty, who we'll get some input from Mr. Jannetty later on in the list as well. But it's Jericho comes out, has a quick match with Jannetty, and then gets back on the microphone afterwards and starts going into this promo where Dean Malenko's gimmick was the man of 1,000 holds. Jericho proclaims himself the man of 1,004 holds. And for the crowd's enjoyment, he's going to list them all.
And he proceeds to just ramble off these makeshift moves that I don't think he named one actual move.
No, they started out legitimate. It starts out with arm drag, then goes to arm bar, and then it falls off the rails with number 3 is the moss-handled the three-legged moss-covered family gridunzel.
Yeah, and then it turns into the Canadian something after that.
Yep, and then they cut to commercial, and then they come back, and he's still going, and every other damn move is arm bar. It was just so much fun because this was a point where the cruiserweights in WCW could practically get away with murder. They weren't really being booked for anything in particular.
Right? They just kind of had a thing where they were just going out to wrestle.
Right.
Like they were showing up to get paid pretty much.
So the reason I put this on my list was this was the first time I really enjoyed a heel. Like, it was the funny, goofy, so over-the-top, ridiculous, you can't help but laugh at this heel. Edge and Christian would eventually go on to take this whole kind of shtick to the next level. But it was just so ridiculous and enjoyable that you couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of this guy coming out with a giant list. Oh, and I forgot. He gets interrupted by Prince Iaukea, who grabs the list and, like, rips it in half, and Jericho's scrambling to pick it up. He dives out of the ring and is yelling, my moves, I need my moves. And it's just so absurd that you cannot help but laugh, even though this character is so annoying.
But then you jump forward to the list of Jericho.
Right.
And it's essentially the same thing, except now he's just putting people that made him mad on it.
Yeah, exactly. So Jericho's always been great at figuring out how to be entertaining, but the cool thing about Jericho is he can also become very serious when he needs to be.
Right.
But yeah, so this made my list because it was the first time for me, at least, that I was so legitimately entertained by a heel. And it was kind of enigmatic of that time in the business of the late 90s where, yes, the heels were starting to become cool, but he wasn't cool, he was entertaining. And I really appreciated how entertaining he was. And like I said, Edge and Christian would go on to do similar things. And just, this was, for me, was the first time that I was not just either A, that guy's cool and I like him, or, ooh, I just hate this heel because he's the heel and he's so annoying. It was legitimately me kind of going, hey, wait a second. Despite what they're presenting this guy as, this guy's really entertaining.
All right. And next up should be one of mine,
yes.
right?
Next up is yours from WrestleMania 25.
Ah, okay. This was a good one. So this was kind of at my peak of coming into watching wrestling. I wouldn't say again, but I would watch little bits here and there throughout the early 2000s to kind of catch the end of the Attitude Era stuff.
So this is kind of what more solidified you.
This, and along with, we'll talk about
some stuff we're getting to.
Yeah. But this was a real big moment because I had kind of caught the end of Shawn Michaels' career, like after, or when he first came back from his retirement.
Right. Originally, Shawn Michaels was essentially retired for 4 years, starting in mid 1998, right after WrestleMania. I'm gonna guess it's WrestleMania 14, maybe 15,
Somewhere around there.
somewhere in there. Right after his match at WrestleMania versus Stone Cold with Mike Tyson as the special enforcer on the outside.
Yep.
He'd actually had a really bad back injury earlier that year in January against Undertaker at Royal Rumble, and he was essentially forced to retire because of his back. And he stayed out until 2002, I believe, is when he finally managed to come back.
Yep, and the first time of me seeing him back was when he was in the Elimination Chamber. So I had kind of caught this second run towards the end of his career and actually being the end of his career, because the moment I'm talking about is Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels, where it's the streak versus
His career.
This is when Undertaker came out full Druids as like the darkness, and Shawn comes out from the top of the Mania thing.
That was so. Honestly, I'd never actually watched this match before. I was a huge Shawn Michaels fan, but this was kind of when I was out of wrestling for a little bit. Yeah, the opening was very well paralleled, where they had Shawn Michaels kind of on a lift descending from heaven, dressed in a white trench coat and white hat.
Whereas you have Undertaker, who's coming up from the bottom of the stage, flanked by Druids all the way down.
Yep, and dressed in black. So, real nice dichotomy there.
Yeah. The match overall was, I thought, one of the best matches I had ever seen at this point in me watching wrestling.
Fair enough. Going up to this, I could definitely see where that's a easy argument to make at this point.
Shawn was, again, kind of trailing off, so he was getting a little bit slower, but he was still good.
Yeah.
But you had Taker, who at this point was kind of in his, after the Attitude Era, his kind of swing into being the heavyweight champ on SmackDown. And
yeah, he was kind of having a career resurgence over on SmackDown and definitely coming back into his own, upping his game a lot, going from the slow, methodical to still slow and methodical, but much more explosive at times, I would say. And yeah, more explosive.
Especially when you have the spot where he dives out of the ring.
Right, doing the dives, failing to be caught by Sim Snuka, and Sim Snuka then being fired from the company for dropping Undertaker at WrestleMania 25.
Yep, almost takes the camera to the face at that point.
Well, it was more that he was just supposed to catch them, and he didn't catch them, and he pretty much landed neck head first on the concrete.
Yeah. But overall, it was a great match, and at the time when I was watching wrestling where I wasn't as smart of a mark as I am now.
Fair.
It was one of the best matches I had ever seen. I'm sure there are plenty others that I'm forgetting about that I watched at some point, but this was amazing.
I mean, for me, it was a little bit weird that they didn't make more of his retirement, I kind of felt like.
Well, they had a pretty big deal on the Raw afterwards.
Okay, so they kind of just, because this wasn't the main event of the evening, it wasn't even the co-main event of the evening, they kind of deferred it to that. That makes sense then, as long as he got a proper send-off.
Oh, yeah. He had, like, similar to what Daniel Bryan and Edge had, where they come out and they talk, they address the crowd, address the locker room. Shawn puts his hat down in the middle of the ring and walks out, kind of thing.
Gotcha. Okay, so fair enough there, but definitely a very understandable moment. So, all right. Next up is actually another one of yours.
Oh, sweet. Which one?
Now we're switching over to TNA.
Ooh.
And we have the debut of Captain Charisma Christian in TNA, and kind of associated with this, Christian winning the NWA World Championship for the first time.
Yeah, so this was in February of 2006 when he wins the title. He debuts in November of 2005. I had always been a Christian fan.
Fair, very fair.
He's a fantastic wrestler. I thought he was always great on the mic.
Yup.
This was kind of my outsiders showing up on WCW. I didn't get that watching live because I wasn't really into WCW.
Right, so this was the closest thing that you really ever had to people jumping from one promotion to another promotion.
Exactly. And literally 2 or 3 weeks before, Christian was on WWE. So it was one of those things where I was watching WWE and I saw him. He disappeared for a few weeks, and I happened to be flipping through the channels, looking for TNA. Shows up.
Why you would do that, I still don't know, but sure.
We'll get to that. the reason I watch TNA is coming up. But the fact that all of a sudden they're making this big deal of this guy who's showing up and nobody has any idea who he is, because again, I'm not a super smart mark at this point, and this music hits, and at first there's a countdown, and I'm thinking, holy crap, did Jericho jump over to TNA?
Yeah, they really did kind of set it up very similar, but very much more discount
Yeah.
as Jericho's kind of entrance.
And then all of a sudden Christian Cage flashes on the TNA screens, and I was like, oh man, this is a big deal.
Christian definitely was a pretty big get for TNA at the time.
I mean, he was probably their biggest, because you have Kurt Angle didn't show up until slightly later.
Was it? I thought Angle was there earlier than that.
I don't remember seeing him before that, but if anybody wants to fact check us on that one.
But if you want to time check us, please feel free.
February of 2006 is when we're talking. I mean, aside from that, it was really just Jeff Jarrett.
Yeah, Jeff Jarrett was pretty
Rhino.
much...
Rhino was there, but not
Yeah.
super big.
I'm about to say Ron the Truth Killings was there.
Again.
Yeah.
But shortly after he debuts, again, from November to February of the following year, he ends up winning the NWA title for the first time, which actually ends up being his first major world's title.
Right, that was definitely his first world championship. He would go on to get a couple in WWE once he came back.
Right. But
yeah,
you have,
at the time.
you have the NWA title, which is, at this point, still a relatively big deal. I mean, if you look at the lineage of that title.
Yeah, that definitely weren't nothing. So me, never was a TNA guy, still is very hard pressed to even try to be an Impact guy. I will say I very much appreciate that TNA gave Christian a chance to be a big deal, because he wasn't the biggest deal compared to Edge when he was in WWE. He was always going to be kind of second fiddle.
Yeah.
But when he went away and achieved top card success and was then able to come back and still maintain that top of the card role when he was in WWE, CW, and then on SmackDown, even winning the World Heavyweight Championship over there,
Yeah.
he showed that he could carry a promotion on his back. He could be the number one guy, and that raised his stock with WWE. So,
As far as I'm concerned, it's only a matter of time until he ends up in the Hall of Fame.
oh, definitely.
And we'll talk about why February 12th of 2006, when he wins that title, is important a little bit later.
Yep, that one's coming up pretty soon. But next is another one of mine. So for me, and we're on number 6 here now, for those trying to keep track of this. Mine was early 2001 when the WWF bought WCW. This was right around the time I was really starting to pay attention to a lot of like the internet stuff. So I was becoming smarter to the business. But this was just such a radical change in everything.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think about it. This was what kind of solidified WWE as the promotion in America.
Right. They went from being big in the 80s, struggling in the 90s, really coming into their own and hitting a good stride by the end of the 90s, to being the biggest and essentially for a while only, and depending on how you look at TNA, really legitimately the only wrestling business.
At the time, I would kind of put TNA as, because TNA started up in 2001, 2002-ish.
2002, yeah. 2001, 2002, yeah.
They were the step between the indies and like ROH and CZW and things like that. They were the step between that and WWE.
Right. They were the next closest thing to WWE, but they were not on the same level as WCW in its prime.
No.
And just, it was such a radical shift in the dynamic of the business. And it was the moment itself was so weird to tune in that Monday night. If
that was when they were doing the simulcast, correct?
Yes. So that was still when WCW Nitro and WWF Raw were going head to head. If you turned into Nitro, you saw Raw. If you turned into Raw, you ended up seeing some of Nitro.
Which I could assume if you're not watching the internet or reading specific things,
exactly,
that would be a little jarring.
It would be very jarring. And if you were just a WCW fan at the time and you didn't watch WWF, what on earth were you thinking?
Yeah, I could see a definite, like, what the hell kind of moment.
Yeah, I mean, they eventually would turned it into an angle, and we ended up getting the whole invasion and everything, but just outside of the wrestling business part of it, was just such a giant dynamic shift in the landscape that you didn't really know what was going on. You didn't really know where we were going to go from here, but you knew something had changed.
Yeah, something drastic just happened.
Yeah, it's like you knew that this was history, and this was so major. Just everything changed after that. I mean, to this day, you end up with WWE being really the biggest game in town. We're only really now getting back to the point
where there's
a viable,
legitimate competition.
Well, maybe not even there's not even legitimate competitions, but just another legitimate way of earning an income in the business.
Right.
Like for the longest time,
or even
you
just
had
something else to watch.
Right. That's what, 17, 18 years almost.
Yeah.
It took nearly 2 decades for the business to really start recovering from that, and it's still so drastically different.
Yeah.
So, all right, that was number 6 on our list of giant moments in wrestling history for us. Number 5, also mine, and this, it's less of a moment and more of, I don't know, it's weird for me to describe. So number 5 is late 1980s, early 1990s, Great Muta.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I could see that.
So I'll admit it's a little bit of an odd pick, but this was back when I had first started getting into wrestling. I started probably watching around 1987, 88. Only watching WWF Superstars really on Saturday mornings.
Okay.
Muta, I never saw Muta in his prime on TV. I only knew about Muta because of wrestling magazines at the grocery store. You would go, you could see the WWF magazine, but you'd also see these other magazines like PWI, and they'd be like black and white with only a few color pages as opposed to the full glossy WWF magazine. And you'd read about this guy, the Great Muta, and him spraying mist into people's eyes. And my other friends that watched wrestling at the time may have seen him on WCW here, or National Wrestling's WCW,
right?
National Wrestling Alliances, because that was still in the days where Turner was showing it, but I don't think he fully owned the NW. He didn't own the NWA. They were still transitioning between NWA and WCW.
And WCW moving off onto its own.
Right. So you just knew that there was this guy that had face paint and would spray this Asian mist, this Oriental mist into people's eyes.
And it was all these different colors.
Yeah. There was green, there was red, and there was like hushed, rumored tones of the black mist. And
there was a blue.
Was
also.
it? Oh, I didn't even know about the blue. So
yeah,
now you're just blowing my mind.
Yeah, blue was, and I went through and I read, when you told me about this, I read what each one of them did. The green was supposed to blind you.
The green was supposed to blind you. So, and this was part of the whole thing between me and my friends. We'd be trying to figure out what these mists did, and there's this. So I'll tell you what we thought. Then you can tell me what popular thoughts were. So we thought that green would blind you for like up to 5 to 10 minutes.
Okay.
Red would paralyze you for 5 to 10 minutes. And then there was the rumor of the black mist, which could knock you out for up to an hour or it might even be able to kill you. Which, looking back is the most ridiculous thing I'd probably ever thought up to that point in time, that someone in a pro wrestling match was going to die from getting some food coloring spit in their face. But, I was 8 years old. I was 9 years old.
Right.
And you had this character that was just so mysterious and possibly deadly, and everyone was selling this mist at the time like, holy crap, I can't see.
Yeah. So the green mist would blind you.
Okay.
Red mist would burn your eyes and burn your skin, so it was almost like a pepper spray.
Oh, okay.
Black mist would knock you unconscious, but there was no death.
Oh, all right. Half credit.
And the blue mist would actually put you to sleep.
Like sleepy time mist.
Not even like unconscious, but it would actually put you to sleep. Like there's a video online of I don't know who it is, but they use it, and the guy falls asleep, and you can audibly hear him snoring. So it's kind of funny to see this stuff, and especially Muta, because he would transition back and forth between them.
Right. So I remember a match back from 1989, I think it was, when I was looking these up. It was him against, I believe, Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert.
Yep.
Beginning of the match, he hit Eddie Gilbert's valet, Missy Hyatt, in the face with some green mist.
Yep.
Then later in the match, he busted out some red mist against Eddie, I want to say.
Yeah.
And then almost immediately after red misting Eddie, he went back and green misted someone else.
Yeah, so he's one of the only ones that, surprisingly enough, would switch back and forth like that. Like, you have Tajiri, who would almost always use the green.
Yep.
Or there was somebody else who used to use it every now and then.
So it actually originated with the Great Kabuki in the 70s.
And he would almost primarily, too, stick to one color, if
I
I'm
think
not
he was
mistaken.
primarily green.
Yeah.
And the plot thing was that the Great Muta was the son of the Great Kabuki.
Yeah.
Absolutely false, but that's where that lineage of it came from.
Yeah, and he introduced all these new colors to the Asian mist.
Gotcha. So that's my number 5, and I picked that one honestly just because the sense of wonder I had as a kid around the business, I clearly don't have that anymore. I'm unfortunately much older, much more cynical about everything, but I can still just remember that time very vividly, being just amazed and awestruck and just whispering in hushed tones with my friends as we try to figure out what's going on with this crazy substance and this character that's just so deadly. Like, we literally thought he could kill someone in the middle of a match, and apparently, according to some of his opponents from back in the day, they maybe would have preferred that.
I could imagine.
Apparently, Muta was a little bit stiff back in the day. Some of those knees to the head may not be always appreciated, but yeah, just Muta in general has always been kind of one of my favorites in the business, just because I always kind of remember and hold on to that feeling I had back when I was a kid and just how that made me feel. And he's a pretty awesome character beyond all of that. But all right, that's my number 5. Or our number 5, I should say. We did this together. There won't be any more 5s on the list, so boom. All right, number 4 kind of goes back to when you were talking about Christian and TNA, your number 7 there. So number 4 was Edge cashing in his very first Money in the Bank on Cena at New Year's Revolution.
And not only was it the first time Edge cashed in, it was the first time ever.
Anyone. Yeah, very first Money in the Bank, when he had won it the year previous, and they didn't really know what to do with this thing.
Yeah, and it was at the point where they didn't know how to kind of play this off. And when Edge ends up cashing in, it kind of sets the precedent of cashing in on a vulnerable champion. Because this was immediately after Cena had just retained the belt in a Elimination Chamber match. And it was quite the bloodbath. Cena had one of his worst cuts of all
he was
time.
a bloody mess. And so he survived Elimination Chamber, was very relieved, and then out walks Vince McMahon.
Yep, and Vince, because it was the first time, Vince was there to announce that the person who won the Money in the Bank was cashing in
Their opportunity.
their actual opportunity. And everybody was like, oh man, something's going to happen.
Yeah, no one really kind of understood that it could have been used in that fashion.
Right, because the only real understanding of it was they got a title shot. It wasn't a this can happen anytime, anywhere kind of thing.
Right. And Edge has been carrying this thing around for a while.
He still holds the record for having it the longest at 280 days. He had it for almost a full year.
Oh, even Rollins didn't go longer than that?
Nope.
Whoa.
So you end up having Edge walk out with Lita. He hands the briefcase to Vince, and listening to Edge and Christian's podcast, Edge actually told a story at one point about how he hands the briefcase to Vince, and Vince looked him dead in the eye and said, "They never said you'd be a main eventer. I never said you'd be a main eventer. Prove me wrong."
Yeah, and that kind of explains that first spear from Edge, where he demolished Cena on the first one.
It looked like he was going to run through Cena's midsection.
It looked like he was going to run through the ring and up out through the crowd and leave town.
So Cena takes a spear, kicks out.
Yeah.
Because got to keep the people's champ looking strong.
Well, I actually kind of appreciated that part of it because it seemed like such an easy opportunist thing to do that, okay, maybe it's not quite as easy as you thought.
Right. Maybe Cena's actually going to put up a fight for this.
Build the drama a little bit.
Yeah.
Clearly didn't, right? 3 seconds later as he
No.
took a second spear and then got the 3.
Edge had a very short, shocked look on his face, squatted back in the corner, and let rip with another spear.
Right, which I kind of actually appreciate for the character of Edge. He didn't go crazy fancy on it or anything. He just
Nope.
went, oh, okay, well, let's just...
Let me do it again.
If you ever played SmackDown games on PlayStation way back for the very first PlayStation, you know, when you charge up like 5 special moves in a row and you just keep unleashing your special?
Yep. That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
But it was one of those where, and again, this is kind of at the beginning of me kind of coming back into the full swing of watching wrestling. I'm watching this for the first time, and I'm like, holy crap. Like, this briefcase is a game changer.
Yeah, it's like out of nowhere, we have a brand new champ on something that was never even announced at the pay-per-view.
Yeah, they had never said, because I'm pretty sure Edge had a match earlier in the night, but it wasn't anything fancy.
Right.
But the fact that the Elimination Chamber gets lifted to the rafters, people are actually starting to go home.
Yeah, people had started to clear out of the arena because normally at a wrestling event, as soon as that main event is over, you kind of start to clear out because much like any giant sporting event, parking gets a little hectic and it's tough to get out of that.
Yeah. So people were actually leaving, and all of a sudden Edge's music kicked on, and people
then you
came
see people
sprinting back.
You see people just suddenly freeze and turn around and filter right back to their seat.
Funny enough, that was actually in Albany, and it was Edge's first world title win.
Go upstate New York.
Yeah. And if you go back and listen 2 episodes now in our super show with the guys at Missing the Mark, Shane was actually there for that. He talked about that.
Yeah,
for a
that's right.
second.
He did. He was saying that he was getting up, getting ready to go, and then suddenly like, oh, hang on a sec, got U-turn.
Yeah. So it legitimately, I think people were leaving and had to turn around and come back.
Yeah, completely unexpected.
So going back to what I was talking about with Christian, this happened on January 8th, 2006. Christian's first title win was February 12th, 2006.
So essentially within a month of each other.
Yeah. And it was kind of a big deal because both of these guys were tag champs. They were at the top of the tag division, but they've separated to go do their own things.
Yeah, they had separated, and they both kind of floundered around the mid-card for quite a while, and
Yeah.
Edge had always had that main event look to him. Christian, less so. I mean, everyone thought that Christian was not going to necessarily be the Jannetty of ENC, but the Jannetty of ENC.
Right.
Better off than Jannetty, but...
So they both had kind of gone back and forth with mid-card titles and things like that. But to have them both win their first world titles, just
that close together.
it's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, that's definitely a cool moment, especially for them because they had worked so hard and a long time in the business by that point. They'd been in for, I believe, probably over a decade at that point.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Not on WWF, but
no, but if actually wrestling, doing the indie stuff, and making their names known,
yeah,
easily
yeah.
10 years.
And it definitely is cool to see their hard work pay off like that, and especially so close together. So I can definitely see that one.
All right, so what do we got next? Should be one of yours, correct?
Nope. So it's two of yours and then mine for the finish off here.
Okay.
So your number 3 or our number 3, you picked it. Perhaps the most famous promo of
Ooh.
the modern era of wrestling.
This is the pipe bomb promo by CM Punk
Yep.
on Raw. I don't know what I can say to convey to you guys how important this promo was.
Right. And I can actually speak a little bit better about this one because originally this was on my list as well until we shuffled the things around a little bit.
Yeah.
So for me, this was such a drastic change in the business just due to it being really the first time in a long time, essentially since the internet really became a thing, that the company did something that I didn't know what it was.
Yeah, there was no telling what actually was going to happen after Punk cut this promo or what this promo was going to be about.
Right. It was just such a dramatic shift away from the normal
Scripted.
overly scripted WWE main event stuff, where CM Punk cut this promo where, if you haven't heard it by now, please go listen to it. He cuts this promo that eviscerates so many sacred cows of the WWE that no one should be able to mention, let alone rip to shreds.
Right. He hits points where first off, he comes out in an old school Stone Cold Steve Austin t-shirt.
Yup.
And the one thing that I noticed is when he's walking back from grabbing the microphone, he's actually tapping the top of the microphone to make sure that it's on.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it was one of those things where he didn't think that they were actually going to let him say this stuff.
Yeah. I think he knew they were going to let him. So in knowing what we know now, we know he was allowed to go out and told to vent
Right.
his frustrations. I don't think they necessarily knew entirely what he was going to say. I don't know if he necessarily knew entirely what he was going to say,
No.
but he knew they were going to let him go somewhat.
Right. And he goes for quite a bit. He talks about
He goes for a
how-
solid 5, maybe 6 minutes.
Yeah, first off he rips apart John Cena and how
Well, no, he pulls the curtain back on John Cena.
right, he rips apart the company on John Cena.
Yes.
He says, I hate this idea that you're the best because you're not.
Right. That's what that's how he started was, I don't hate you, John. In fact, I probably like you more than I like most of the other people back there, but I hate the idea that you're the best wrestler in the company.
Yep. After he kind of drops that, he, of course, breaks the fourth wall, looks directly at the camera, and waves hi to Colt Cabana.
Yep. And then he launches into the boss.
And this is after him talking about how he might leave and jump to New Japan Pro Wrestling or to ROH.
Yeah, he said he was going to take the title to New Japan or ROH, but that he recognized that it didn't even matter if he did, because the juggernaut of the WWE
would
machine
just keep going.
it wouldn't miss him.
And he goes at the fans a little bit because he's not on the cup. He's not on the posters.
Trying to still make it a heel promo.
Yeah.
But
Then he, like you said, jumps in at the bosses.
yeah, so acknowledging the WWE machine, saying maybe it would be better once Vince is dead.
Which if you think about that, you literally just said that you're going to be in a better spot once your boss is gone.
Right. You're basically saying we'd be better. Well, we theoretically might be better once the boss is dead,
But then,
except for his stupid daughter and doofus son-in-law.
and the fact that he calls Triple H a doofus makes me laugh to no end.
Well, and the big wink here was WWE had still not yet acknowledged that Triple H and Stephanie were actually legitimately married in real life.
Yeah, at this point, Stephanie wasn't really an on-screen character.
Stephanie wasn't an on-screen character. Triple H wasn't an on-screen character in any sort of authority role.
Right. He was just kind of backstage, would occasionally come out and have matches every now and
I
then.
think he was like mostly. Well, he had been mostly retired since his match with Undertaker, I think, right? At Mania. He didn't officially get retired like Shawn did, but he had pretty much taken an off-screen role, except for the occasional big event type thing.
Right. And the fact that he launches into this and just starts ripping the bosses apart makes you think like, holy crap. Like they're letting him say this stuff?
Yeah, and it just, for the amount of time it went on, and eventually what gets the mic cut, which I don't know if this happened to coincide with when they had to go off the air or if the content was legitimately just too much. At the time, WWE was big on their anti-bullying campaign.
Right.
And he calls out how hypocritical it is of the company to take an anti-bullying stance given the backstage politics of the company.
Right. He starts in with let me tell a personal story about Vince McMahon and this anti-bullying crap, and then nothing happens after that.
Yeah, his mic goes dead. He starts tapping on it. He yells into the camera a little bit, and they go off the air.
Yep. So if you haven't seen it yet, and even if you have, it's always good
worth
to
a revisit.
It's always good to go back. I honestly watch that video at least once every year or so.
Yeah, and like I said, for me personally, assuming this is roughly the same reason you picked it, is just it made the business different again. It let me know that the business still has some surprises left in it. It can still shock me, besides just doing something extra stupid like maybe making Jinder Mahal world champ.
Well, see, mine's a little bit different because this is about the time that this promo happened, and I had to jump online to figure out what the hell just happened. This is what turned me into the smart
This
mark.
is what smartened you up to the business of going, wait, can you actually do this?
Yes. This is what kind of propelled me to end up
Dig
being
deeper.
here.
Yeah.
So, again, if you haven't seen it, or if you haven't seen it in a while, go back and watch it. It is cut up a little bit on.
Yeah, it's
line.
a little tricky to find the full actual version because there was a little bit that happened when they went off camera.
And you would also want to watch his promo the next week when he
The
talks
next week
about
on
some
Raw
stuff.
when he was having the contract signing because, right, we both actually misremembered this.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, it's actually called the Mandela effect, where
Yep. You think
You-
something happened,
and
but it
actually
didn't.
many people think it happened in a certain way, but it didn't. So we had both thought the part where he brings up the ice cream bars was in the pipe bomb promo. Turns out it wasn't. But
No, it was the next week. But again, definitely something you should go and watch.
definitely. All right, so that was number 3. So we're down to our top 2. So let's do your next one. Then we'll do our honorable mentions, and then we'll do our number 1.
So this for sure for me is number 1 in my books. This was, again, back in 2005. I'm kind of getting back into the swing of watching wrestling more often, every week kind of thing. And I happened to stumble upon this little company that's on a different network that,
I mean, TNA being pushed on Spike wasn't that little at the time, but
right,
they weren't the biggest.
but it was one of those where I was like, oh, there's another wrestling company that I can watch.
I have options.
So I'm tuning in a little bit before this match, and I end up seeing this guy that calls himself the Phenomenal One. and I was like, holy crap, this dude is amazing. Some of the stuff that he's pulling out and jumping off the ropes and some of the moves he's doing, I was like,
springboard shooting star press.
yeah, it's one of those things where because WWE is set in their ways, I had never seen something like this before.
Yeah, WWE, even today, when they're best about it, isn't great at highlighting some of the crazy athletic things people are able to do.
Right. And he's part of this X division that they're calling it in TNA, where it's not really cruiserweights, it's anybody who can put on an exciting match.
Right. I guess in our modern terms, we'd call it the work rate belt.
Yeah. So then there's the guy who actually has the belt at the time, Christopher Daniels, going through his Fallen Angel gimmick, where it's kind of like a mixture of Undertaker and Chris Jericho almost.
So at the time, I had always wanted to be a Christopher Daniels fan. I was never able to really get myself up to watching TNA, but everything I had always read about this guy and the little bits I had seen on videos online, noting that this was pre-YouTube days, so it was tougher to see a lot of material from other guys.
Yeah.
Everything I'd ever seen of him, I loved the gimmick, loved his ability to work. He just seemed like a really great wrestler.
And at this point in 2005, he had been wrestling for almost 15 years.
I don't think quite, about a decade, I want to say.
He was just a little over. He was probably somewhere between 10 or 15.
Fair enough.
He had the belt at the time, and he was running as the actual heel in this match. And then out comes this guy who reminded me of Taz for a little bit.
Definitely, and much different than the other two guys in the ring.
Right. AJ and Daniels, they're smaller.
Yeah, definitely smaller. Both definitely, at current day 2018, they're definitely both heavyweights, just maybe more because of age than ability.
Right.
But back in 2005, a decade and a half ago almost, they were definitely cruiserweights. They're 205s.
Oh, yeah, easily. I think AJ comes out and he's 180 something.
I want to say
190.
he's 180.
And then you have Samoa Joe walk out. And this is in the midst of his undefeated streak where he had never been pinned or submitted in a match.
And this was younger Joe. Joe's never been lean by any definition, but this was definitely in a period where he cared and was trying to keep himself as small as possible.
Not to say he doesn't care now.
Sure. No,
But-
definitely not now.
But he's at a point where he's probably walking 250, 260, somewhere around there. From what they build him at.
I believe they bill him now at like 280.
Yeah. So he was quite a bit lighter than he is
at
now.
the time, I would guess maybe 245 to 250. I suppose I could buy it back then.
So this is the first one of their 4 triple threat matches for the X Division title and for not. This was single-handedly and still holds up as, I think, one of the best matches I have ever watched.
Yeah, I had never actually sat down and fully watched it until I was doing our homework for this. And, I mean, yeah, compared to 2018, have I seen better matches? Yes. This was seriously good, though, and it definitely holds up.
It's one of those where you could watch this at any point and still get a feel for wrestling as a whole.
It definitely had great in-ring like mat work by Joe, the high flying between AJ and Daniels. And Daniels made it like a really good medium kind of in between for the two of them. He had a lot of more of the aggressive mat-based stuff, but could definitely do like best moonsault ever.
Which still is one of my favorite finishers. For those of you that don't know, he jumps up to the second rope, bounces from the second rope up to the top rope, and then bounces and does a moonsault off of the top rope. And it's just entertaining to watch, especially because of how fluid he makes it look.
Right. It's essentially a double jump moonsault where he just jumps from middle turnbuckle to top and then does the moonsault, as opposed to triple jump being corner, then one side of the turnbuckle ropes, the other side of the turnbuckle ropes, and moonsault.
Right. And again, like you were saying, the high flying stuff with with AJ and Daniels, And then you had Joe who comes out and he's still getting the Joe's gonna kill you chance.
Yeah, he could just AJ or Daniels could hit a giant high flying move out of nowhere and knock someone dead. Joe could just crack someone with a kick or a punch or
he was the Samoan submission
Yeah.
/ suplex machine.
right, but say he could hit a muscle buster and just kill you. There was
Which again, that's another move where, because I hadn't seen anything like it in WWE, I thought somebody's neck was broken when he first hit that.
unfortunately that would happen at one point in time, but yeah,
Right.
that one time aside.
It's still one of my favorite matches and kind of solidified my hope that there would be something as good as this consistently throughout the card.
Yeah,
'Cause-
it kind of set a benchmark for you of, oh, this is what it really can be when it's firing on all cylinders.
Right, because TNA at 80% of the time was not this good.
No, definitely not.
WWE 75% of the time was not this good.
No.
Now that we're starting to get New Japan, Ring of Honor,
NXT.
it's now I still look at some of these matches that are happening now and look back to this one, and if it's as good as this, I know it's a good match.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. So,
So that was at Unbreakable in 2005. Joe, AJ, and Christopher Daniels. Go back and watch that if you haven't seen it.
it's available for free on YouTube. You really have no excuses not to.
Right.
All right, before we get to number 1, honorable mentions. Think we had a couple, maybe?
I think you had some.
I had at least 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Honestly, I can't remember too many of them at this point, which is sad. I definitely at least want to bring up something we had brought up a couple weeks ago. The 3 faces of Mick Foley. That 4-part interview with Jim Ross.
Yeah.
I forgot until we had watched it a couple weeks ago for that whole thing how emotionally strong and enticing Mick Foley and Mankind as a character really were.
He was fantastic character work, and he backed it up in the ring also.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he could go as a wrestler, as a hardcore wrestler, as whatever, but the way you actually so emotionally got into his story,
Yeah.
I don't know if they've really ever been able to replicate that, and I don't think anyone ever did it that well before him.
No.
Just
I 100% agree with that.
how they made you care so much for this, frankly, pretty detestable, weird character.
Yeah.
And they made him into such a relatable human being. How just their ability to humanize a character. I
Yeah.
think that's really that was the biggest takeaway from that one for me.
I do have one honorable mention.
Okay.
Edge retiring on SmackDown.
Oh, well, on Raw and SmackDown.
Yes. So that was the first time that I had somebody retire due to injury, not due to their own free will. And I will 100% say every time I watch the video of the roster coming out, clapping, and Big Show bawling his eyes out and giving Edge a hug, it gets me almost every single time.
Yeah, the real like those times when the curtain gets pulled back just a little bit and you really see them for a human being.
Yeah. This was at the point where I started to like Edge a lot. He was great with the heel work. He was great as a face, and he just seemed like the champ that you wanted to root for when he was a face.
Right. His obviously his initial run is kind of like the weird loner guy, and Into the Brood was all well and good, and then as ENC, he really starts getting you under your skin, and then he becomes like the fan favorite for a while.
Yep. And then
it's fine. And then the Matt Hardy Lita stuff hits.
and he gets under your skin.
He really became such a detestable character. But by the end of it, by the time he starts kind of coming out the other side, and you're really kind of cheering for this character to turn it all around and really kind of come back to this character you've always known he could be.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, unfortunately, to kind of get the legs cut out from underneath that by this injury.
And every time, it breaks my heart whenever I watch those videos.
The original one on Raw the next night after Mania when he first announces it, and at the very end where he says he's going to be okay and go home and have ice cream, but there's just that little hitch in his voice that makes you go, oh.
Yep. And then when he shows up on SmackDown.
Yeah.
And he says, I have to vacate the title because I have to retire. And it's one of those where you're like, oh no.
Yeah, it's gutting.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are our honorable mentions. So,
All right, number one.
number one was from me from way back in 19... Do we have the date of it? I don't know.
I don't.
Nah, I don't think we actually have the date. I think it was like 90 or 91. It was The Rockers on The Barber Shop. And this was the split up of The Rockers. And as a kid, The Rockers were my favorite tag team. They were bright, they were colorful, they were two young guys.
Why wouldn't they be? They're the old school version of the Young Bucks.
Exactly.
And it's always upsetting to see something like this happen to the world's favorite tag team.
Yeah, like these guys had just been great. They were never actually officially recognized tag champs,
Right.
but they were just so likable and at the time high flying, high energy. They were just very different for their era. And they had been having their rough moments. It seemed like something was going on with Shawn and actually everything's okay. They're getting back together and then oh no.
Face first directly through a glass window.
Super kicked and then thrown through a window.
According to Bobby Heenan, he was actually trying to escape that coward.
Would you stop? Which Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby Heenan narrating the whole thing, icing on the cake.
Ooh, I knew he was going to do that.
Oh, I knew he was going to do that.
Oh, did you see Jannetty try to dive out the window? That coward trying to escape.
Just Heenan, easily the best announcer in history in retrospect. But when I was a kid, this was just so gutting, and I would go on to hate Shawn Michaels for so long.
Well, and this was also during a time where kayfabe was still a thing.
Oh, it was alive and well.
Where you didn't know what was happening behind the scenes. Everybody thought that if this guy hated this guy in WWE, they actually hated each other in real life.
Oh, definitely. And as it turns out, that may have had some truth to it.
Right.
But this angle would go on to play out over years.
Yeah.
Marty would leave for a while, and I believe it's because he actually got fired for a while, and then they brought him back eventually. But he would come back on Monday Night Raw, back when Raw was coming out of not the Civic Center, whatever that small arena, Hammerstein Ballroom.
Yes.
It was when Raw was weekly out of the Hammerstein.
Mm-hmm.
And Marty Jannetty would come back and eventually take the Intercontinental belt off Shawn Michaels. They would kind of pass it back and forth a little bit. But this was just this was my real introduction to a long-running, real-feeling feud.
Yeah. One of those long-haul, slow-burn feuds.
Yeah, definitely. It really kind of crystallized me into caring about these characters or despising these characters, as the case may be.
And it was another one of those where you had, you could even tell some of the stuff that was happening was such a big deal because of the reaction on the fans' faces. Like, they cut to the one woman who's got her hands over her face, and she's like,
oh, yeah, because I don't know if I had ever seen blood on a Saturday morning before this.
Which, was that accidental? Or did
Marty
Blade when
Marty
he was
bladed.
hanging over?
As it turns out, he was very lucky because that was supposed to be a stunt window, but it wasn't a stunt window.
Oh, so like Angle throwing Shane McMahon through the glass?
A little bit not quite as bad as that, but on the flip side, the actual glass shards that were hanging above him that could have fallen at any second
And cut the man in half?
would have sliced him in half, yeah. It could have ended very terribly. But all right, that's my number one wrestling moment. That's really the thing that made me what's apparently going to be a lifelong fan, whether I like it or not at times.
Yeah. Which, I mean, out of all the picks to have, that's probably quite a few people's picks.
Yeah. So, all right. Let us know what you think about these. If you have a different moment, if you think maybe we should have ranked them a little bit differently.
Wrestling History Podcast at gmail.com.
That's us.
We're on Facebook, This Week in Wrestling History. Twitter at WrestleHistPod. Let us know. Give us some actual feedback because we haven't gotten much yet.
We know you're out there. We've seen the numbers.
We see you guys downloading it. Let us know that you're actually there. So if you can, give us some ideas. Maybe we can hit a top 20 when we hit episode 20, or maybe we hit something special where we talk about people's things like that.
Yeah. Anyways, before we completely go home here, we have next week planned out already.
Do we?
Yeah. Next week's going to be No Mercy 2001.
Oh, that's right.
So we got that coming up, and then the week after that, we have our first guest.
Yeah, we're going to have my brother-in-law Steve on, and he's, if not as big a wrestling fan as me, probably bigger. He's been watching it for significantly longer.
But say it sounds like he goes back to my days of wrestling.
Oh yes, he goes back to the early WCW when Muta was actually showing up.
So what we'll be covering in 2 weeks will be our Halloween episode, and we're going to be covering Halloween Havoc. So
yeah, so it'll be a interesting couple of weeks.
Yeah, so we got some good stuff coming up. So thank you guys so much for tuning in, and definitely stay tuned for what we have coming in the next couple of weeks. I think it's going to be pretty exciting here.
Yeah, should be good.
All right, we've done the plugs. We've done our stuff. We got anything else?
Nope, we're good.
We're history.